Now you may or may not know, but stroke is a really big problem globally and also particularly in the UK. About 150,000 people have a stroke every year in the UK. Our work began in 1993 when we started testing what was called a drop foot stimulator. One of the problems that people have when they've had a stroke is often that they have difficulty walking. They find it difficult to lift their foot, and so they tend to trip. They tend to feel very unstable, they often have falls, and as a result they're very reluctant to actually go out and walk in the community. So this device is very simple. It has electrodes which fit onto the just below the knee, which stimulate the muscles which lift the foot, and the stimulation is triggered while they're walking by a very simple foot switch that goes under the heel. So every time they take a step, the muscles are stimulated, the foot is lifted, and they're able to walk without tripping. And this was an idea which actually was around for quite a long time before we did the first clinical trial. But when we did the trial, we found that it did in fact improve their walking, it made their walking faster, and it made their walking less effort. And we showed that there was a clinical benefit and a statistically significant benefit. And so as a result, other people were interested in that. And although it took a very long time, in 2010, the treatment then became adopted by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, NICE, and is recommended by the Royal College of Physicians stroke guidelines. And there are now quite a lot of people who are using that. To date, we've trained over 2,500 therapists in 14 different countries. And this was some work that I did with colleagues in the NHS, running courses to train therapists initially in the UK and then later in these other countries. Although people found it useful in that it helped their walking, they also had a lot of complaints about it. They said it was quite difficult to put the electrodes on in the right place, and they didn't like having the leads dangling down from the stimulator that they wore on their belt. And they said, wouldn't it be a good idea if we could have this implanted? And so we then worked with the university in Denmark, the University of Aalborg, and we worked with them to develop an implanted stimulator. So instead of having the electrodes on the skin, there was one electrode which wrapped around the nerve inside the leg, and the stimulator was implanted as well. And so all they had to do was to wear a little device just on the outside of the leg and a very small box in their waist. And that didn't work any better. It didn't make them walk any better, but the patients liked it much more because it was so much easier for them to put that on. After a few years, other people heard of what we were doing, and they suggested that maybe we could do something with the problem that people have with their hands. We were contacted by a not-for-profit organisation in California called the Alfred Mann Foundation, and they were interested in working with us because they had a little stimulator like this, which is very small, and this can be injected under the skin to lie next to one of the nerves going to one of the muscles that moves the hand, or that moves the elbow, or that moves the shoulder. And it's really quite easy to put in. You have to make a very small incision, you have to stick a needle in to find the right place, and then introduce it, and then just do a couple of sutures to hold it in place. So it's a very simple process for doing it. And so we did a study with them, which took 4 years, and we developed a way of controlling the stimulator so that we could activate different muscles at different times. And we had 7 patients who we did this with, and we stimulated the muscles to open the hand, and the muscles to extend the elbow, and the muscles to lift the arm. And we showed that if we did that, we could actually get quite a lot of improvement in their ability to move their arm. And the idea behind it was that they would relearn to those movements. So they would relearn to be able to use their hand. And this was shown to work quite well. Now, there's another sort of technology that we have used in helping stroke patients recover the use of their arms, and that is to use rehabilitation robots. And these are quite sophisticated devices that the patient rests their arm in the robot, and the robot will actually move their arm for them as much as they need to. So if the person is able to move their arm without the help of the robot, then it allows them to do it. But if they need the help, then the robot will move their arm. But what we thought was, well, maybe we could actually combine using electrical stimulation with the robots, because then it wouldn't be the robot that was doing the work if they couldn't manage it. It would actually be them that was doing the work, because it would be the electrical stimulation to the muscles. And so we got some funding from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council in order to do a very early study just to see whether this was possible. And we built a very simple robot, and which would enable somebody to follow a very simple tracking signal. And the way we made this work was that we provided some stimulation, and they tried to follow the tracking signal. And then the robot knew how well they'd followed the tracking signal. And so with that information, we could then change the stimulation to try and make it more accurate. So each time they did it, the stimulation was adjusted based on what they'd done before, so that it was more accurate tracking. And they would practice it many, many times, gradually getting more and more accurate in doing it. And when they could do it really quite accurately, then we started to take the stimulation away, so that the patient was then doing it without the help of the stimulation and without the help of the robot. We did it to begin with a very simple movement, and then we stimulated more muscles, and we had a robot that would enable them to go in 3 dimensions as well as just forwards and backwards across a table. And now we've got to the point where we've actually got rid of the robot. We've just got a very simple arm support, and instead of playing games, people are actually doing everyday tasks. So they will be doing things like reaching up to switch a light switch, or to pull open a drawer, or to unscrew something, or pour from a cup. So they're practicing real objects. And this is really all based on what people say they want to be able to do. We've found that if people practice doing real activities, they learn better actually than just playing games. A lot of the research that we've done has been to find out whether these devices work, and who they work with, and how they should be used, and in training therapists in using them. But unless the devices are actually produced commercially and are available for people or for the NHS to buy, then they're not actually going to be useful to large numbers of people. So one of the things that we've done is to work with various companies into developing them as commercial products. So probably one of the best known companies in the UK is Oddstop Medical, and they manufacture functional electrical stimulation devices. And they've sold over 16,000 devices now, not just in the UK, worldwide, some of them that are used in the NHS and some of them that are used privately. And also companies who are building robots that are expanding, and they're producing cheaper robots, because these are the things that people are more likely to be able to afford to buy, what the NHS is more likely to buy. And so there's quite a big increase in the commercial field now in developing these devices. So one of the important things about the research that we do is that it's multidisciplinary. This means that you've got engineers, you've got therapists, you've got doctors, you've got patients and their families, you've got psychologists, you've got the developers of devices, control engineers, signal processors, huge number of different disciplines who have to work together. And what we've been very lucky in that we've got some funding now from the European Union to develop a master's course in advanced rehabilitation technologies. And the idea of this course is that it's an environment in which students from all these different disciplines can learn together. They come from, therapists will come onto it, engineers come onto it, and they come with a basic knowledge in their own subject, but on the course they can then learn about the other disciplines, and that in their research project they can work together with somebody from a different discipline. And it's really only by these different disciplines working together that we can really solve the problems and develop new technologies that we can be sure are going to be useful to patients. So the MSc in Advanced Rehabilitation Technologies, or MSc Art, is led by one of my colleagues, Dr. Anne-Marie Hughes. We're leading the project, which includes 11 universities across Europe. We received about €500,000 funding to develop the project, and we're now into the second year. And in a year's time, we hope to be recruiting the first students onto the first course.